Reports from Ukraine say fierce fighting is raging in the south of the country. Some Western officials are calling it a new major push by the Ukrainian army. Kyiv's deputy defense minister said earlier this week that Ukrainian troops are advancing toward the city of Melitopol near the Sea of Azov. Without saying how far, fighting has been reported near the village of Robotyne, which Russian forces have been occupying. Russia has reported a major uptick of Ukrainian operations in the region south of the city of Zaporizhzhia. Russia's President Vladimir Putin spoke of the latest fighting on the sidelines of the Russia-Africa summit.
Regarding the past few days, yes, indeed, we can confirm that combat activities have intensified significantly. The main battles took place on the axis that the West calls the main one, main strike, the Zaporizhzhia axis. The enemy did not achieve success on any of the battlegrounds. All attempts to wage a counteroffensive have been stopped. The enemy was pushed back and suffered heavy losses.
And for more on this, let's bring in Marina Miron, a military analyst at King's College, London. Welcome, Marina. The New York Times is quoting Pentagon officials saying what they call the main thrust of the offensive has begun. What does main thrust mean, and what's the evidence to back this up?
Good evening. Well, we have to understand that Ukraine has not yet committed the forces that have been trained in the West and that hold most Western equipment. This would be the 10th Corps. The main thrust here is basically the fact that the Ukrainian 9th Corps has been apparently due to reports that we have been seeing, able to break through the first line of defense and Robotyne. According to some Western reports, however, the Ukrainian side is not yet commenting on that. And so if they're successful, then the forces trained in the West can be deployed to capitalize on these early successes.
Now, if this now is the main thrust, is that just the beginning, or can we view it as one last push by Ukraine?
Well, I think it depends on the outcome if the Ukrainian forces are able to capitalize on that thrust, because even the Russian side has admitted that the fighting has been very intensive. And so right now we need to see what happens next and when the 10th Corps with Western technology will be deployed, because this is the first line of defense, but we're still having those so-called dragon teeth. We have trenches. They might not be as difficult to breach as the minefields. However, once the Ukrainian forces break through and send in the reserves, the 10th Corps, that would be the main instrument that the Ukrainian armed forces have at their disposal. And then that will be the one and the only chance, either make it or break it for the Ukrainian armed forces.
Now, Ukraine has been mainly probing Russian defenses, relying on infantry movements. Now, if it's decided it can commit significant amounts of armor, what does that tell us?
Well, Ukraine has been probing for now over a month, 1.5 months, to see where the weakest spots in Russian defense lines are. And it would seem that, according to Russian accounts as well, not official accounts, that the Ukrainian armed forces have found some weaknesses in the lines of defense, and especially as we're seeing now in Zaporizhzhia and Staromaisk, which is right next to the spot where the Ukrainians broke through. So that would suggest that those spots have been identified, and now Ukraine is starting to increase its tempo and commit more forces as it's possibly foreseeing a chance to break through Russian defenses through all of the lines.
Now, how are you perceiving the Russians to be responding to these attacks?
Well, the response is rather mixed because if we look at official statements, and we've heard it before, President Putin did admit that the fighting was rather intensive in that portion of the front line. However, all Ukrainian attacks have been repelled, and Russians seem to over-dramatize it in order to show how successful their forces are. So we have to take it with a grain of salt. Russian war bloggers have admitted that there has been heavy fighting and heavy shelling from the Ukrainian side, and there have been reports that the Ukrainians managed to wedge into the Russian defenses. So I would say that information is not confirmed yet. However, the messages are mixed, and I think we should tend to analyze what the voyeurs are saying, because they have a better picture of what is going on the ground.
Now, Marina, we've seen pictures popping up of destroyed Western equipment. Doesn't that show that there is at least some success in the defense for Russia?
Well, we have seen it from the very beginning as well, and we have to understand that it's a very difficult task for Ukraine, especially in the absence of air power. That is where the Russian side can leverage its air power, and we have to understand that Russia has more military capabilities as well. So even if the losses of Russian equipment are higher in relation to the Ukrainian equipment, Russia has more capability to commit more equipment to the front line. And so what we have seen, and essentially from the very beginning of the counteroffensive, the loss of Bradleys, the loss of Leopards, this is because of the minefields. The echelon defense system that has been built by the Russians has been underestimated. And when the Ukrainian armed forces started probing Russian defenses, they quickly found out that it's probably best not to commit to expensive Western technologies. This is why they are not using it right now, because they have a disadvantage here because they don't have air superiority.
Marina Miron there from King's College London. Thank you very much for joining us here on DW News.